Hey, hey, hey. We'll get started here in about 5 minutes. Got a few people that will come in here late, but look forward to going through everything with everybody. So let me get my screen up and running. There we go. All righty. Well, we've got about a couple more minutes. I just want to give everybody enough time to come into this live streaming on Facebook, YouTube, as well as everybody that's joining us. We had, I think, over 30 registrants, a lot of people from our team. So just give everybody a couple more minutes, get settled in, because we're going to cover a lot of stuff. Chewy saying, nice hat. Thanks, buddy. Couple more minutes. Actually, I'm going to set some. And get a couple more links in here. Get the benchmark. Here we go. There we go. There we go. All right, guys. One more minute and we'll get started. Google was being weird with my links this morning, so we're going to get everything rolling here. $30 seconds. There we go. So I want to thank everybody who is coming in to this webinar. We're going to be doing a series of webinars. Hey, Gary, thank you. Good morning to yourself. We're going to be doing a series of webinars in 2024. I just wanted to kick this one off kind of as a pilot test webinar. It has a lot to do with planning for next year. If you both own rental properties or you're interested in owning rental properties, I think that's the two pieces of the puzzle that everybody wants to get more information and be more efficient, or be able to learn and be able to eventually buy rentals and be able to operate them at a level in which they're not losing money. Obviously, that's the goal of everything. So I'm going to cover a lot of information here. I think it's over 40 slides. What I'll do in this whole sequence of things is we will open it up to questions and answers in the chat towards the end, and I'll let everybody know when that Q&A session will start. It's going to be a lot to unpack, but a good review for people who might not understand a lot of the stuff that's going on. This is tailored to Oregon. So I want everybody to know that even if you're out of the state of Oregon, there's going to be a lot of information here that's going to be helpful and beneficial to your investment journey. But I had to tailor some of it to Oregon because that's where we're at. That's where we're operating. So just wanted to break this down. Now, in eventual note, we do have other webinars that we do both with the Oregon Real Estate Investors Association, with title companies, continuing education credit. This one is specifically not offering any CE credit, but we will be collaborating and being able to help any real estate brokers, property managers, people earn CE credit in the future. Both Ed and I have registered as certified instructors. So so that's where we're starting. So 10:05, just like I promised. I want to go through this webinar. As questions do come up, you can drop them in the chat, and then I will get to that Q&A session and kind of take them in first come, first serve. There's going to be a lot of information that we do cover that may be a little bit confusing, and I do present pretty quickly. So feel free to ask questions, and we'll go from there. So today's webinar, Revitalizing Your Rentals in 2024, 10% increases to 10x returns. I came up with this tagline, this slogan, because what we're dealing with in Oregon is a legislator that has capped rents at 10% or 7% plus cost CPI, which means that our property management, our asset management, our pro forma, and how we operate rental properties has to be very, very strategic, right? If the government keeps creating regulations that limit your ability to profit or regulate or operate your business, i.e. your rental properties, in a way that you would like to run them, right? Free trade, then we have to come together as a community and share ideas, be creative, and also follow the law. I think that's a big disclaimer in all of this. We're not people who are running rental properties, being slumlords, or doing anything that's outside of the ordinary or outside of the law. So good asset management is going to follow the law. It's going to be able to grow your portfolio and have rentals that are profitable and appreciate. So that's ultimately the goal of this webinar. So let's dive right into it, guys. Let's go through this. What to expect in the next 90 minutes. It may be shorter than 90 minutes, but I just wanted to allocate enough time because we may have a lot of questions and answers. We're going to learn Dan's top tier asset management strategies for boosting rents and maximizing ROI. We're going to fine tune property management efficiency to minimize vacancy and headaches. We're going to amplify curb appeal to dominate the market and enhance property valuation. And we're going to gain insights on key questions that can catapult your rental property valuation by 10x. And I really, truly mean that. There's some people right now that own rental properties that make $100 a month. They may make $10 a month. And the 10x valuation of that net income is definitely possible by implementing great strategies. Now, full disclaimer, I'm not a licensed property manager. I am not a real estate attorney in the state of Oregon. So if any information that you are seeing in this presentation is purely for informational purposes, there's no guarantees, warranties, returns, anything that's promised. And by watching this webinar and agreeing and moving past the slide, you're not going to sue me. Basically, be a model citizen and be grateful for the information that people give for free. So that being said, let's dive into it. Key topics and questions: how to craft a property man evaluation, master the art of serving property increases, identifying the capital expenditures that promise long-term returns, transform units to command top of market rents through strategic marketing, navigate critical decision of when to change property management companies, reevaluate the myth of long-term tenants being the ultimate goal, discover prime locations for your next rental property, understand your investor journey trajectory, and uncover the reasons to entrust property management versus self-managing, and decode the right timing versus selling or versus 1031s. Now, a lot of this seems all over the place. And the reason for that is because when you're dealing with revitalizing your rentals, I've had to compartmentalize this presentation into 4 or 5 big subject content arenas. And I think that is the hardest thing to really follow if you're a new investor. Is there's a lot of different stuff that we're going to cover today, but which of it is most important and which of it is something that I could be implementing long-term versus right now. So we're going to dive into all of that. Bear with me as we get started. A little bit about me. If you're on my team, you already know most of this stuff. Bachelor's degree in advertising from Kent State, team leader of the Operative group, partner with Ed Zulvik with a few different investment companies, certified investment property specialist, negotiation expert, probate specialist. I serve on the board of the Rental Property Association of Lane County. We're in the Lane County multi-million-dollar club. We've completed over $30 million in investment transactions. including 1031s, owner carries, master lease options. So we are pretty much in the trenches each and every day with investment properties, not only operating investment properties, but also advising and representing investors throughout the state of Oregon and working outside of the state on other ventures and investments. So that's enough about me. If you want to follow for more content, more information, Operative group on Facebook, 5K followers. You can follow me on Instagram at Oregon Real Estate Expert. We have over 27K followers there. Watch our YouTube. In 2024, you're going to see about 2 videos a week popping off. 10K follow or subscribers there. And then you can also check some of our web or podcasts out. We have about 3,300 subscribers. And I think at this point, it's 65,000 views of Real Estate vs. Tech podcast. And then I'm also jumping on a podcast about once every other week. So that's enough about me. I want to talk about the first biggest component to all of this before we break it down into sections. That is why. What is your why of being a property owner? And I covered a lot of this in a separate presentation that I did on valuation of rentals, but I wanted to be really clear here because there's a lot of people that jump into real estate investing and they don't actually understand why they're real estate investing. And what I mean by that, over the last 5 to 10 years, popularity of real estate investing has boomed. Instagram content, YouTube content, people quitting their jobs, buying Airbnbs, replacing their 9 to 5, like everybody's heard it all. Fix and flipping on HGTV, fix or flop. I mean, you've seen it all, guys. It's popular now. People are into it. It's a very rising niche of real estate. And I want to be clear here that the why of being a property owner and landlord or rental property operator is slightly different than fixing and flipping properties, being a wholesaler, and doing all the other specific niches of real estate, including being a real estate agent. So I'm not going to go through all of this, but read through these things before we move forward. I think understanding your why in real estate as a rental property operator is super important in the entrance of being a rental property owner, right? Not at the, I'm going to sell everything and exit. Because if you're getting into a new profession or you're going to be getting into a new investment vehicle, whether it's crypto, Turo, short-term rentals, whatever it is, doesn't matter what it is. Understanding your why of why you're doing it going into it may evolve, it may change, but it's going to solve a lot of the problems moving forward. And ultimately, if you treat it like a business, it's going to help you out in the future. So that being said, there are 3 investment trajectory paths. And I want to be really clear here is once you break these down, most investors fall into these three buckets, whether you inherit property, whether you buy your first property, or you own a crap ton of properties. All right. The growth stage of investor trajectory is you're always looking for more rentals or you're looking for more investment opportunities. You're talking with agents, you're expanding into different states, you're performing 1031 exchanges, you're growing your door count, you are financeable. You're continuing your education on coaching and watching webinars like this. You're investing in capital expenditures and you're increasing the valuation of your properties because the ultimate goal of your investment trajectory is to make more money and grow your portfolio. Next is the sustainability trajectory. We see this a lot. I would say that 50% of investors that have been in the business for more than 10 years are in the sustainability trajectory path. And what that really means is they're looking to collect the rents and live off what comes in. They're not trying to grow that LLC. They haven't bought or sold a property in years. They haven't done a 1031 exchange ever. They're not really looking to expand or sell, or typically if somebody sends them an investment property to look at as a broker, they typically pass on it and there's no really drastic turnover in their portfolio. They're not doing anything to better the properties other than take a couple repair calls and keep things predictable. And guys, the sustainability trajectory in rental property, especially if you're looking to go into 2024 and beyond in Oregon, is a very risky area to be operating in. You're either growth, sustaining, or the last, which is the liquidation trajectory. And we see this at property owners that not only are aging, but also property owners that inherited properties that are not interested in being landlords or rental property operators. And that liquidation trajectory is super important to understand because most of these people are looking to possibly understand the valuation of their property because they've been curious upon selling. They are not really pushing for better efficiency or management. They're still collecting in the sustainability mindset of I just want rents and I'm really not going to put any of that money back into the properties. And typically, that's the reason why we see low rents and lack of management or bad tenant issues. And I want to say that as a board member, as somebody who is a rental property owner, worked in syndications, I can tell you that most distressed apartment complexes that are traded on the off-market arena are in the liquidation trajectory. Somebody bought it in the 70s or 80s. They're not interested in doing anything to it. Their runway has come to an end, and they want somebody to swoop down and take over that property and just get the equity or appreciation out of it. And guys, there could be tons of money in the liquidation sector trajectory. But the reason I'm spending more than 3 minutes on this slide is that once you understand which investor path you want to be on, you can tweak your action plan for 2024 to either revitalize or reposition those properties. That being said, like I said, simple buckets to break down all of these different questions that we're going to cover. First, the benchmark. The benchmark is, what are my properties worth and how much money are they actually making? All right. Now, I'm not going to do a work class here, but I do have spreadsheets. Bigger Pockets has a calculator. There is a lot of different ways that you can evaluate rental property valuation and also rental property performance. And I want to break this down, that rental property valuation and performance are directly inversely attached to each other. But most people, when they call a real estate broker and say, hey, I have a duplex, how much is it worth, are forgetting the other 50% of it, which is what actually is the true annual property operating data, the APOD of that property and how it's performing. That's going to include the following 5 things: your gross rents, which is going to be your rent roll. It's going to include any additional income you're making, which could be coin operated laundry. It could be storage. It could be parking. I mean, there's a wide range of things that you could be collecting income on, including maybe it's mixed use and there's an office building with triple net lease there. It's also going to include your taxes. It's going to include your insurance. It's going to include your gross expenses, right? One of the first questions that we ask as a real estate broker to a landlord is, hey, how much are your rents and what utilities do you pay? We know you pay taxes and insurance unless you're an idiot and you want to have your property burned down and essentially not get anything back, but you're always going to have income coming in and expenses going out. And the more expenses that you can remove from your P&L, the more income you make. It's a very simple relationship. Next, and lastly, what is your debt service on that property? Now, I want to be really clear. Debt service and taxes are not performance indicators of an APOD, which means we're collecting that data and that information to take that APOD even further. But taxes, which are constant and they're an expense that doesn't lead to performance. And number 2, your debt service, what happens if somebody buys it with cash? They have no debt service. So you can't value or perform an APOD on a property based upon the debt service it has if you're truly just looking at the performance of the property. How much income is coming out, how much expense is going, or how much income is coming in and how much expense is coming out. Guys, whether you're a newbie real estate investor, a new real estate broker, or even moderately own 5, 10, 15, 20 doors, you don't know how many investors I meet that actually don't know these numbers for their properties. They file their taxes every year. They get a Schedule E. And then next thing you know, they actually don't know what the performance is. They just know a bottom line number that they made. Whether that's good or bad, they need to be identifying how to craft an APOD and be able to build a better perspective of that property. Now, like we said, I have an APOD that I'm going to share real quick. There's a lot of information to go through this. I can help anybody that doesn't understand how to run an APOD. I can point you in the right direction to find an APOD. There's tons of resources out there, but creating benchmarks for valuation will allow you to market your property intelligently versus coming up with some arbitrary price that has no data backing. I want to be really clear here, guys. When you see an investment property hit the market and the first thing a seasoned investor says is those numbers don't make sense, is the worst presentation of the property being marketed on the property or on the market. 9 times out of 10, when you see an overpriced investment property, it's because they didn't run an accurate APOD and they priced the property to some market value in their head, not actually comps plus income approach. So I want to be really clear here that we've always been told numbers don't lie. Now, that being said, I'm going to exit this for 2 seconds and I'm going to jump over to an APOD that we've built. And not going to break you through a bunch of confusing spreadsheet stuff because that's not the point of this webinar. But each and every one of your properties should have what we call actuals and pro forma. And what you can see here is in column B, actuals is what's happening. Pro forma monthly is where we could be. So if we're starting out with a vacancy at $0 for one of the units and one of the other units is $800, where could we take those rents to get full performance of that property, right? And inside packing that, what other expenses or income do we have on that property, right? There's zero valuation on any of income coming in. And then also tenants are paying for water and sewer. They're paying for landscaping because they're mowing their own yard. They're paying for electric and gas, and they're paying for the trash service. So the landlord in this specific APOD is not paying for anything. And that's what we see is the best opportunity to increase valuation. So that being said, also property taxes and insurance, we can put inside of this valuation. We usually remove taxes for cap rate when we're looking at cap rate, but also we're looking at the full picture of everything and how much gross expenses, how much gross income, and then what does that really break down in terms of valuation and rules. Now, we've all heard of the 1% rule. 1% rule is 1 month of gross income is 1/100th of the valuation of the property, right? Most properties in Oregon don't meet the 1% rule or don't even come close to 1% rule. And that's the case on most of the West Coast states. What we have is we have a high valuation of property and rents haven't caught up. Now, in other areas of the country, we have a lower cost of acquisition or value of property and still high rents. That is pretty much why we see closer to 1% rule in other states that have emerging populations, big growth booms happening or jobs moving in, and you're going to see those better valuations. Now, by taking the APOD and then being able to evaluate things like the 1% rule and also the gross rent multiplier, which is your monthly gross rents times 12 months, which is your annual gross rents divided by the purchase price or the valuation that you think your property is. It's going to give you a range of what we call the break-even point if you paid cash. And typically in Oregon, anything under 10 GRM is going to be a really good investment, but may have a lot of distressed maintenance or capital expenditures that need to be taken care of. And then anything above that, usually like that 10 to 12, 12 and a half, 13, if it's well maintained, is a really good deal, right? It has a faster return on investment from a gross rent multiplier perspective. Now, I'm not going to deep dive into cap rates and other things because cap rate is city specific, market specific. But what we can see is that if you're buying a super high cap rate property, you got to be looking out for things that are probably not being put into that P&L, including capital expenditures, roofs, parking lot refinishing, big things that are going to stabilize that property. Or we're seeing a super low valuation because we have a distressed seller, but we still have high or reasonable rents. So cap rate can be a little bit more confusing for investors out there. I always try to tell everybody is study cap rates within the city that you're living in, the city you're going to be investing in. Next, cash on cash return, best measured in the year one. Cash on cash return is going to be your down payment, your closing costs, your furnishing costs. If you're doing a short-term rental, it's going to be all of your costs divided by what your return is on that property over the annual. And that cash on cash return is different for every different type of asset or acquisition. Rental property versus fix and flip. You'll see cash on cash returns that are extremely high on fix and flip because you bought the property for $100K, you sold it for $300, you made a huge $200,000 profit, and you put $50K into it rehab. So your $50K plus $30K in down payment was only $80K, but you made $200,000, $300,000 in profit. So every asset class is going to have a different cash on cash return. I typically try to tell everybody is rely on cash on cash return and total return on investment are going to be so different in different asset classes that you're going to have to find those benchmarks and really figure out the market and where that really operates. Now, I'm not going to go into syndication, valuation, key performance metrics like internal rate of return or preferred returns or any of the other stuff that you may see on more passive investments. But your APOD is a basic framework to build the numbers out and then project on where you can cut expenses, increase income, and what happens to the valuation and the rules of that property as things go. Now, this specific spreadsheet that we built by hand has other things that we evaluate, which is the exit analysis if we're selling that property. We're also looking at cash on cash return analysis. And then we're also looking at one last thing that I'm going to cover here, which is the mortgage analysis. Now, if you're buying with cash, there is no mortgage. So you have 100% down payment. But if you're buying an investment property right now with a mortgage that has an 8, 9, 10% DSCR loan or whatever it is, your mortgage analysis is going to be extremely important to then looking at the APOD and what current rents are and current expenses are. Because what you're trying to do is you're trying to figure out your cash flow before debt service, which is your mortgage payment. And then after you pay your mortgage payment, what is your cash flow, your net that we call? That's going to be the money that goes into your bank account after all expenses are paid and your mortgage payment and your taxes and your insurance. And what we're seeing is as the interest rate goes up, your standard investment acquisition is going to require more of a down payment. Reduce principal, reduce mortgage payment. And the higher the interest rate, the more down payment requirement that is needed. I'll give you guys a benchmark. 3 or 4 years ago, when interest rates for investors were between, let's just say 2.9 and 4%, you typically could get away with creeping down all the way to a 15% loan to value, an 85-15. I'm not saying all lenders were allowing that, but you could buy a property with 15% down in some markets and still cash flow $200 to $300 a month per door. Now that interest rates have doubled, you're seeing loan to values in the 35% to 50% down payment required in order to cash flow the exact same amount of money. And so what is your ultimate strategy if you're acquiring properties right now with high interest? You're going to eventually want to refi into perm debt that is going to give you the same type of valuation at low interest rates. And that's what we're seeing right now. That's what's slowed down investments. And that's why we're seeing a lot of cash investors invest now. So this APOD breaks down a lot of different things from where we currently are. Okay. And then I break it down into asset management expenses, which is everything else that you'll see in a bigger pockets calculator, which includes vacancy, capital expenditures, maintenance and repairs, property management, marketing, city registration fee if you're in the city of Eugene, administration. And then we have a mortgage line there, but it's not an expense from that perspective. We're just trying to look at the total percentage of the mortgage payment in terms of what we're budgeting and what we're turning in income and expenses. So what you're going to see in all of this, guys, is that most properties that are in the West Coast, you're going to have more expenses. You're going to have a higher valuation. As soon as you include debt, you're going to have to be more strategic on how you reposition those properties quickly. In areas where you have lower acquisition costs, higher rents, you have a little bit more flexibility and breathing room in order to reposition those properties over a longer period of time. But the appreciation reward is far less, right? In some investment properties in the Bay Area, when I moved there in 08, 09 from Ohio, you could buy a duplex for $400,000. Right now, they're like $1 million to $1.1 million. So in 10 years, the property has not only, it's like 2.2x, the same exact 2.2x in like Lexington, Kentucky or Nashville made you $200,000 versus a property in San Jose, which made you $800,000. So it's a different type of investing. It's appreciation investing versus cash flow, and how you structure that debt is going to be super important, but it all comes back to running an APOD first, not running a CMA, not running an appraisal, running an APOD first to get a benchmark of where you're at. So let's dive back down into this, guys. Give me 1 second. View slideshow. And I know there's a lot to cover there. There might be a lot of questions at the end, so let's break through this. The price isn't the value. Let me repeat that. The price is not the value. The price of your property is going to be based upon 3 things. What you think the property is worth with or without factual backing is your price. what the market will bear in terms of where it will sell is the market price. But we always want to look at a couple things: price per square foot, price per unit, and then the factors we consider in coming up with valuation on rental properties. Condition of the property. Is it non-conforming versus conforming? Think of a house that's been converted into a duplex versus a side-by-side brick duplex on a corner. Features that could include, does it have a washer and dryer? Does it have a fenced backyard for dogs? There can be a million different things. Location, is it near the university, or is it in next to the railroad tracks and has, tons of issues, right? There can be a million things. But what we're always looking at in this is, where are all of those factors in terms of how it fluctuates when you're looking at property A, subject property, versus all the comps that have sold. Now, I'm going to start rolling through some of this stuff. Your gross rents, your gross expenses, all of your utilities, all of your income that we've covered is all about coming up with an income approach of your property. If you own a single family rental, a house with 3-bedroom, 1 bath, and you rent it for $1,200, or you buy a duplex that has 2 tenants with twice as much rental income and twice as much expenses, right? You're always going to want to look at apples to apples, asset class to asset class. And we see a lot of people saying, well, why don't I just buy a single family rental because it's cheaper as a rental property, versus why would I buy a duplex? It's $100,000 more. There's so many different variables in terms of everything we just talked about on the last slide, but we need to get a benchmark of what that property is doing and how it's performing, and how much of that money that we're going to be investing on cash return is going to give us the returns that we are preferring on in each monthly, annual basis. Guys, what I can tell you this is I follow a rule: 2 doors or more, two doors or more, or none. I don't buy single family homes unless we get them at an extremely low price or it's a short-term rental. It's always 2 units or more, because less risk, more income. Yes, there's more expenses. Yes, acquisition costs can be higher, but we start that single family rental investing strategy between 1 and 4 units at 2 doors. We don't invest in single family homes unless it is a short-term rental, or we get it at a very, very low cost. And typically it's proximity to a university. Now, I'm not going to go through comps and a bunch of different stuff, but we're always looking at the price and the value, and selling properties as a indicator of what's going to go on. It doesn't mean what it's going to go on in a month from now or 3 months from now. You're always going to be running comps. We're always going to be looking at actives, pending, sold. We're going to look at comp killers. We're going to look at any upgrades or downsizing options. And we're going to look at the market in a very, very strategic standpoint. So advise your real estate broker or somebody that you're working with so that you know what to do when it comes to valuating your rental property. Next, I really want you guys to understand that the valuation principles and the key performance metrics that we covered in terms of gross rent multiplier, cap rate, cash on cash return, price per unit, price per square foot, I want you guys to learn this stuff, because every investor that I learned, that I asked the question, I'm like, how many doors you own? Oh, I own 8 duplexes. And I'm like, oh, awesome. Which one has the best gross rent multiplier, best cap rate, or gives you the most returns? You'd be amazed how many investors actually have no clue. They just own rental properties, collect the checks, make the money. And in some theory, that is okay. But we always should be running a business with very, very, very keen business acumen. We should be looking at things and looking at all the levers that we can pull in order to create a better valuation of property. So I've kind of just broke down a list of things that are going to be those key performance metrics. Now, understanding what you need to document your rentals. This is super important. Even if you're not going to sell, you should always have a Google Drive folder or a Dropbox or something, right? I don't care if it's a paper folder in a cabinet. You need to have a rent roll that is up to date. That means when a tenant moves out, you update the rent roll. It has who lives there, what their rents are, was there a pet deposit, what their security deposit is, and what unit it is, and lease start date, lease end date. You need to have the information. If you're hire a property manager out, they're going to have that inside of like a Appfolio or different products. Okay. You should have copies of the leases. You should have a monthly insurance bill or a policy binder for your investment property. You should have copies of all your maintenance agreements or annual contracts like Terminex or pet people or pet waste removal, whatever it is, garbage. You need to have a cookie crumble trail of every bill you're paying for that property. You need to have your annual P&L statement that's typically coming out of your QuickBooks. You need to have your Schedule E's that's coming and being filed from your accountant. You need to have a copy of all delinquency notice or evictions that you've had in process. You need to have accounting of all prepaid rent, security, key, pet, other deposits, inventory of all personal property that is included in the sale or included in the rental property. I don't know how many people I know that have a washer and dryer or a refrigerator taken by a tenant because they actually didn't keep track or even remember that they paid for the refrigerator and then it's missing when the person moved out. Guys, a list of all capital expenditures. Keep a list of the remodeling and the updates you do, because in the event something happened to you and you had to sell your property, or somebody, God forbid, and your family had to sell the property, you should always have this locker full of stuff about your property, i.e. your business. Super important. I don't know how many investment listing appointments I'll go on. I'll go to the rental property owner and I'll say, hey, do you have any of this? And they'll have one thing, the rent roll. That's it. Very, very hard to create an accurate APOD if you don't have this stuff, and you can't have or prepare an investment property addendum if you don't have this information. All right. Now, the pro forma. This is taking the benchmark and now turning it into better rents. All right. Now we're going to really start breaking through this. We're 18 slides in of 40. We're about halfway done. On July 6, 2023, Governor Kotek approved Senate Bill 611, which then capped rent increases at 10% and or 7% plus consumer price index. Let me remove the and. Or 10% or 7% plus published consumer pricing index. Really what that means is this year is 10% rent increase because the consumer price index was way more than 10%. And so that being said, if you have a rental at $800 a month, that means you can only raise it $80. Now it's going to be $880 after a 90-day notice to the tenant. All right. Plus or minus a couple days, and follow the rules of the property management and the tenant laws are in place in terms of serving those notices correctly. Now, that being said, as soon as you have rental cap regulations, that means you need to know exactly where your rents are right now. Well, biggest question I always get, and I just sat down with an investor like 2 or 3 days ago. He goes, I said, when has it been in a year with all of your, so he went through all of his tenants. I said, when has it been a year since you've increased your rents? And he's like, oh, for 2 or 3 or 4 of these units, I've never even increased the rents. I don't even know when their lease started or lease end, but I do know that they're month to month now. And what is the correct protocol in serving them an increase, and what is it, right? So you're going to see a lot of those questions pop up. Now, I'm not trying to tell you that you have to advise you to do a 10% increase, because what happens if you just rented that property a year ago and it's at market rent? Guys, I don't do 10% increases to everybody. There's some I do 5%, some I do 2.5%, some I don't raise at all. There's some that I do 10%, right? It all depends on that specific property, that specific situation, and the specific APOD and where we started and where we're trying to go. The purpose of any business that is not a nonprofit is to profit. Let me advise you on this again. The purpose of any business that is not a nonprofit is to profit. Nonprofits have specific tax code, and they have write-offs, and they have all of these special IRS regulations because they're not for profit. But you don't know how many investors, whether it's in the state of Oregon or in Florida, are running their rental properties in the same mentality of a nonprofit. Oh, I don't want to get rid of my tenants, or I don't want to piss them off, so I'm not going to raise rents. I'm just going to keep them where they're at. And then they want to sell their property and it's worth $200,000 less than what they thought it was. Guys, you're in a for-profit business. If you don't want to get into investing in real estate and run a for-profit business, then do other ventures like the stock market or investing passively in a syndication or a REIT. But what I'm trying to say is that this is a business in which you have to look at a case-by-case basis. And if you didn't just do everything I just did on the first 18 slides, how do you know where you are now? It starts with understanding and then being able to prescribe the outright rent increase. I'm going to give you one example. One of our properties has a septic system. It is extremely, extremely important to understand one thing. The cost of that septic pumping service had gone up $1,000 year over year. So last year was $2,000. This year was $3,000. And yes, this property has a lot of units, so there's more frequency happening. Unlike a house that can go 3, 4, 5, 10 years, depending on how many people live there, before the septic has to be. So in 1 year, one of my cost expenditures went up 33%. I had to raise rents in order to scale and trail that expense ratio, make sure to offset some of that expense. And the rents were already low to the market, right? The market rent was $750, $850 in the area, and these rents were like $400 or $450, right? And so when that expense starts happening and more vendors and more people that you don't have many options to hire start increasing their prices 33%, my prescribed rent increase had to follow suit. And I explained that to all the tenants, which we'll get to in a second. Now, I want to explain the importance of keeping up with market rents. I have different stories I could tell you. We could go on for hours and hours and hours. I don't know how many listings I get to where less than market rent problem is then being put on the real estate broker who's trying to list it. I want $500,000 for my property. I say to client, that's awesome if your rents were $1,800 a month. Your rents are $800 a month, but you want market value. Guys, the easiest way to get your market value or close to market value, plus or minus 5 to 10%, is to keep your rents at market value. The easiest way to do that is to first create a benchmark and analyze your pro forma versus your APOD, and then look at what that means in terms of a 2, 3, 4, 5-year plan and raising rents. It doesn't really matter what the state says the rent increase cap is. If you did 5% every year for 5 years straight and you were kept up with market rent with plus or minus 5 or 10%, your valuation of your property would increase and the desirability, the marketability of that property would remain constant. But when you have an investment property with super low rents, needs a roof, needs all these issues taken care of, now you're getting $100,000 to $125,000 to $150,000 less for that same property. So that being said, lower rents don't help offset inflation. Vendors, materials, accountants, just like the septic. Lower rents kill your valuation potential. We just talked about that. Your P&L, your NOI, your cash on cash return, your gross rent multiplier, your cap rate. Lower rents hurt your remarketability, pro forma, appraisal, demand. And I don't want to go into appraisals, but guys, if somebody's going to buy your rental property that you're looking to sell or 1031 and they have a loan, 9 times out of 10, it's going to get appraised. If you have crappy rents, low appraisal. Just happened to one of my friends. He just was literally texting me last night while I was driving home and said the appraisal came in way low. The rents, way low. Bad me. That's exactly what he said to me. Lower rents limit your capital expenditures, and they don't give you the required reserves or the additional surplus in order to take care of things like a roof, siding, windows, appliances when you have turnover or when there's an issue. Lower rents are not a donation to a nonprofit or a community service. If you want to donate it to a nonprofit or community service, raise your rents, earn more money, and then donate it into those causes. That's right. I'm that direct about it. I don't know how many people are running properties like a nonprofit or community service when they could be just making more money and giving more money to those community services. Guys, the point of this business is to be in business, not be a nonprofit or go out of business. Continued market rents equal market pricing when listing, or give you options when you need to refinance or pull out cash. Catching up problem. I see this because I buy a lot of rentals that are negative cash flow or break even. Yes, I buy rental properties that aren't performing, and I call the catch-up problem what I need to do in order to get that property pro forma up to speed, and how long is it going to take me to raise rents without evictions and get people's rents to market. And when I say this, plus or minus a variance of percentage. Rents that are 10 to 30% under market rent to a new investor, they don't want your rental. especially if they have financing in place, because that loan to value, that valuation income appraisal is not going to make sense. So if you have super low rents, you just removed all the finance buyers. Rents that are capped by state laws, you need to continue staying up with rents. That's what we just said. We talked about it for 5 minutes. Rents that now have to be max increased every year for 3 to 5 years at a minimum is because you did 10 years of super low rents. I don't know how many times I hear the story. Tina has been living here for 20 years. Her rent's $750, but she never calls me for repairs. And I say, awesome. Tina's rent should be $2,000 or $2,100. It's 3 times what she's paying you. Now you have to raise Tina's rent max every single year, and she's going to see a 10% rent increase every single year, and she's confused. Guys, incrementally keep it up. Then you don't have to do massive drastic changes. Rents are so low that it won't appraise or finance buyer. We already talked about that. Rents so low that you have attracted the wrong types of tenants or problems. Guys, no discrimination whatsoever. You can rent to anybody. Doesn't matter what gender, color, sex, nationality, anything. But if you are the lowest rental price in the entire city, the barrier of entry is way lower. So that's okay if you own those types of rentals or you have Section 8 rentals, not a problem. But if you're consistently not taking care of a property, i.e. being a slumlord, and then turning around and having the lowest rents in the entire city, don't be surprised when you have issues. Guys, I'm not saying that low-income people bring a bunch of issues, but I'm saying when you don't take care of your property and you don't have a good screening process in place and you don't take care of your tenants and you don't take care of the business, it's just like anything else, right? Imagine a grocery store or a Target that didn't have loss prevention, just allowed everybody to steal their stuff. Or imagine a car dealership that just went to the auction and looked for the crappiest cars and then sold the cheapest cars possible, and then had a massive list of bad reviews. Guys, you're in a service business. You're creating and providing housing for people. So if you're not taking care of those tenants and you're creating the worst conditions possible, typically you're going to have the worst results. Rents need to be corrected, but now tenants are mad at max increases. We already talked about that. Rents have to be aligned and adjusted to continue to be profitable. We've already talked about that, but I just want to hone this in time and time again if you're watching this, because for 2024, correction of your rent increase strategy is super important. Next, the art of serving rent increases and justifying them to tenants. Okay, guys, I'm going to break this down really simple. I'm not going to go through every bullet point. It's this simple. When sending out a rent increase letter and you are potentially planning on doing any improvements or any capital expenditures or any repairs, justify within a 1 to 2 sentence paragraph that, hey, for next year, I'm serving you this 90-day notice to raise in rent increases because my vendor costs or my septic cost has increased, or I'm planning on building a fence, or I'm planning on putting a new roof on this property. But if you send them a rent increase and it says absolutely nothing about any plans to better the property or maintain the property or hire property management, even at a minimum, I'm raising rents in order to hire professional property management so you get better service, then you get a bunch of questions. Why are they raising rents? Why are they doing this? We never get rent increases. Guys, I'm not saying that you have to do it every single time you do a rent increase, but if your plan for 2024 has some asset management plan, share that with your tenants or tell them in person. Send them a very blank letter that says, this is the rent increase, this is your 90-day notice. But if you see them and you're self-managing, tell them you have plans to make the property better. If you have plans to make the property worse, they're probably going to go elsewhere. Notices should go out and must provide proof of where it is going. Follow property management rules. I'm not going to tell you how to serve these. You can advise a licensed property manager. You need to make sure that you're serving them properly. All right. That's all I'm going to say on this line. Now, the improvements. I just hinted at, if you're telling a tenant you're going to raise rents and you're going to do something, then you should probably do something. The improvement bucket. First plan for 2024 with all of your rental properties is to address or create a list or punch list of all of the small repairs that need to be taken care of. When I buy a property and I have an inspection on it, or me and my business partner have an inspection or walkthrough, we literally take a notepad and write down every small repair that needs to be done. and every large capital expenditure. That's without even looking at the inspection report that's going to find other things or back what we just saw visually. Every property, every year should have a checklist of items. I can show you multiple spreadsheets for every one of our properties that we own that literally have a checkbox: completed, not completed. By the end of the year, we review everything we were done. If there's anything that was holdover, it gets moved over to the next year. And everything that is most important to least important is taken care of first. And that definitely deals with safety to the tenants first. That is the top tier of most important. If there's safety issues in your property, smoke detectors, CO2, no straps on your water heaters, there's electrical issues, there's mold or mildew or any of the other issues that can come up in terms of health, guys, take care of them first, get them on the punch list. So if you own rental properties for 2024, the first thing you should be doing before you do any APOD is create a property small repair list. Guys, do it now. Next, identifying the second group of repairs, which are going to be the capital expenditures that promise return on investment. I break this down in 3 categories: property appeal, property amenities, and property safety. I'm actually going to work backwards. Property safety, these are going to be the upgrades focused on making a renter feel more at home and protected. These includes gated parking, exterior security or lighting, stairs with anti-skid mats, fire extinguishers, things that are required by law, on-site management, towing service signs, ring doorbells, anything that deals with safety of tenants. A lot of this stuff applies to bigger multifamily complexes, but I want to be really clear here, guys. If you're identifying and dropping some money and looking at return on investment, if your tenants feel safer and they stay longer, and every time you give them a rent increase, they have no issue or there's no pushback, the valuation of your property keeps growing. So there's a return on investment there. Next, the property amenities. This process can be a bit more complicated because it's easy, because each and every property may have a different capacity of amenities, right? If you have an apartment complex, you may be able to build a dog park or a playground, or bring more value through things because you have expandability and space to do so. I just want to say that return on investment on these projects versus the long-term and short-term rents are huge, because when you go to put one of the tenant turnover listings back on the market, somebody moves out, guys, the properties with the best amenities that have good market price typically get rent faster than properties that don't have amenities. Also, different performance based upon what type of buyer pool, kids and families versus single bachelors. It's gonna differ in the type of amenities you're offering, right? Some apartment complexes have swimming pools. Singles, younger people love it. Families don't. They don't want their 2-year-old kid by the swimming pool. So make sure that when you're breaking down those property amenities and you're looking at what capital expenditures to take care of, you look at who is my persona of renters that are typically renting my property, not who you're targeting, but ultimately what am I seeing in the market? Lastly is property appeal. Now, capital expenditures, you think typically roof, siding, windows. I want to be really clear here that, guys, those are capital expenditures that have property appeal, but they also have property protectionism as a function, right? They're protecting from water damage. They're protecting the family by having good security. We look at all of the appeal things as the actual capital expenditures you can do to a property that are going to appeal to the renter who is walking through it before they rent it, or the renter that is looking at the pictures before they decide to fill out an application, or the tenant that moves in and wants to stay or renew their lease. Guys, things like remodeled kitchens, remodeled bathrooms, good flooring, good trim, good interior paint, not missing wall plugs, having functional ceiling fans and oven fans and everything. Guys, it's the whole picture put together. So that property appeal should be treated just like looking at fixing and flipping a house. So 3 categories of capital expenditures: appeal, amenities, safety. Oh, let me break this down. Maintenance, longevity, appeal, safety is the bottom line. Now, my exact capital expenditures plan has been broken down into exterior and interior. I'm not going to go through each and every one of these items because I want to remain this on target in terms of time. But we go through a full checklist of everything that we want to remodel on an investment property and then everything we want to remodel on the interior of the investment property. And guys, I want to be really clear here. When we're looking to buy a property, if some of these items have been already checked off because the previous landlord or seller has already done them, it has an extreme advantage to the probability of me writing an offer. Let me explain this. If I'm looking at buying 3 or 4 duplexes at a time in a portfolio purchase, and every single duplex has updated HVAC, which is heating and cooling, updated roofs, and updated hardy plank siding and windows, I'm just removed $100,000 plus of capital expenditures that I need to do. It has reset the timeline of capital expenditures because they're newer. The roof has got 20, 25 years. The HVAC's got 12, 15 years. The siding, 15, 20 years, depending on how much rain we get. Guys, there's all of these capital expenditures that you, when selling your property, have to evaluate. What should I do in order to take it to market? Because no one thinks about the buyer, i.e. me, is like, whoa, you have a new roof, new siding, new HVAC, new windows. Perfect. You just saved me a bunch of money. So now I'm just going to go in and do full remodel, gut out, interior remodeling. And so that allows the reposition of that property quicker to now the new buyer. The turnover. Now, we've talked about valuation. We've talked about how to serve notices. We've talked about the importance of improvements and keeping good track of the condition of your property. But what happens when you have turnover? All right. In 2024, you need to use strategic marketing to expose your rentals. There is some of the worst marketing I have ever seen in my entire life, ever, when it comes to marketing properties. Rentals. I also see it on the real estate side, but I want to say it's even worse when I come to see rental properties. And I'm not talking just rental properties, long-term rentals. I'm talking midterm rentals and short-term rentals. How many of you have gone on Airbnb, VRBO, and looked at the first photo of a listing and being like, what the hell are they thinking on posting a picture of that kitchen as the first photo of the Airbnb? We've all seen it. The marketing presentation of your rentals is going to expose your rental and be the first impression to that tenant. So professional, HD, high definition photography, having a 3D tour done, creating a features list, having good property copy or property description, making sure the location and logistics. If you have a property that is close to something, mention it. Making sure you include what utilities are included, excluded, how long that lease is going to be, what the screening criteria is as a company or you as a landlord, what the pet policy is, and what the application process is. Guys, let me say this very simple. There is so many rentals right now, if you looked on Zillow, that are missing half this information. There's so many rentals on Craigslist that are missing half this information. There's so many rentals on professional property, licensed property management companies, vacancy pages that are missing 20 to 25% of this information. Taking photos on your iPhone, if you are not really good at it, can be the difference between your property renting in a week or sitting on the market for 3 months. Take this stuff very serious. Try to make this process easy for your applicants, and first impressions are everything. Next, using strategic marketing to fill your rentals. Now, I'm not going to go through everything here, but for 5 years, I managed some of the biggest real estate accounts for real estate agents in the Bay Area. I also managed very, very experienced property management companies. And I want to tell you guys this. I learned from a company that had been property managing for over 50 years. I'm talking 3, 4, 5,000 doors. I'm talking like hundreds of single family homes and apartment complexes. And I saw each and every day how we would consult the property manager on how we could create a better listing experience for the prospective tenant. And if you want to revitalize your rentals in 2024, one of the first things that you could do is just say, hey, when I get a turnover, what is my process? And how do I listen to what Dan was saying in terms of packaging up that rental and then promoting it to the biggest group of people? And let me stop there and say the biggest group of people, because what I see is people hurry up offense, take a rental listing, Throw it up on those Eugene, Springfield classifieds, Oregon, Portland classifieds. They throw it up there real quick. They don't manage the comments. Yes, you get a lot of haters and trash, but they don't actually put any of that information we just mentioned on the last slide. And they also have horrible photos. So they get like they get the listing out and they understand the exposure standpoint, but they're still missing the critical information to make the most conversion happen. And so what I want to try to tell everybody is, yes, do the first 5 bullet points that I have here, because if you shouldn't or should be doing, that's what you should be doing to start with. But here comes the strategic golden nugget to maximizing exposure. Shoot a 90-second video property walkthrough, promote it on Instagram or Facebook. Have that link go to a vacancy page or an application page. Create a 5-picture carousel ad on Facebook and actually spend money to promote that property to the largest amount of people. If your rental is sitting for 2 months at $1,500 a month, you lose $3,000. Would you pay $300 in Facebook advertising to get that listing out on its own specific ad, or lose $3,000? Upload vacancy property walkthrough video on YouTube. Guys, this is most underlooked. One of our property management company clients, we started doing walkthroughs on YouTube. We started using SEO headlines, meaning like 3-bedroom rental property in the hills of X city. They would have like 100, 200, 300 views. They would text that link to prospective tenants when they would want to fill out an application. Like, oh, which property were you interested in? Oh, awesome. Let us text you the video walkthrough of that property. What it did is it actually increased the amount of applications that were being processed for the property. It actually decreased the amount of actual on-site showings that were happening. So they were getting a more interested party quicker, and they were actually cutting out their time and gas and logistics of showing that property. Yes, some people still wanted to see the property, open the lockbox, go in, show the tenant the property. They move forward with the process. But what they saw in a high relocation turnover market is that people were interested and they would rent sight unseen because they had that property walkthrough video. And so a lot of people would take it. Disadvantage would be they waste a bunch of time in logistics by not just shooting a 120-second video. Send an email marketing to a trusted buyer agent or lender database for non-approved potential renters. Guys, if I was a property manager in any city in America, I would have a massive list of real estate agents and a massive list of lenders that are local. And all the time, I would send out 1 email a week with all of my rental vacancies. And I would simply say in the subject line, do you have clients that didn't get pre-approved, or do you have clients that are going to wait or looking to relocate here but are not quite ready to buy? And I would send out those rental vacancies and let them look through those properties on a weekly, monthly basis. Guys, I don't know how many times as a real estate broker or on my team, and anybody can comment in the comment thread, that we have people who are coming to us, they can't get pre-approved or they're not quite ready to buy, and they need a 6-month lease or an annual 12-month lease. It happens all the time. I would say throughout an entire year, I probably have 40 to 50 people. Listen up, property managers. Listen up, anybody who owns rental properties. If I know 30 to 40 to 50 people that are coming to me that need a rental property before they buy, and I can connect them to you or a short-term rental operator, right? An Airbnb who does like a monthly rate. Guys, I can tell you that I could probably keep your rentals completely full if we had that relationship going. Now, I have prior relationships with people, and I do know there's several companies that I refer that out to, but I'm just trying to tell you that that is a massive, massive, massive opportunity. Now, the turnover process, right? If you're selling a rental property, there is a turnover process that happens with the buyer and seller. So in 2024, if you're going to sell your property and you have current property management in place and there's a new owner coming to the table, we're dealing with this with a transaction right now, property managed. There is a disengagement of the property management, or there is a transfer of property management happening. What this means is that new buyer is buying an investment property with tenants in place. They're either keeping property management in place, or they're replacing property management, or they are going to be the property manager. That disengagement of property management has to be explained to the tenants so they know who the new point of contact is. They understand if there's new leases or paperwork that needs to be signed, where those keys need to be transferred from seller to new buyer. There needs to be a welcome letter that goes out. There needs to be any utilities or a landlord stop form on the utility company so that if the tenant moves out, the new landlord is going to be paying those utilities moving forward. And any service contracts like landscapers or bug people need to be transferred. Guys, you don't know how many times I try to explain this to people and they'll call me like a day before closing and they're like, oh, yeah, so what are we going to do about all this stuff? And I'm like, yeah, we sent an email about this. And this is the other party. This is not my client. We've already explained this to my client. We have tried to reach out to you to disengage the property management. We need the keys. We need the leases. We need everything. So do all of this up front, especially if you're going to be selling. All right. Don't want to go into eviction notices, but there are different types of eviction notices. Refer to your property management that is licensed in Oregon for different types of property management transfers or different types of tenant notices that revolve around revitalizing your rentals. You're going to need to know what forms to be served and how to do them properly so you don't get yourself in trouble. Now, I will go through one quick case study, guys. Super, super important. I got a call from one of my agents on my team this week that said, hey, we're buying a property and we're going to have my buyer actually move into one of the units. And it was a specific county in Portland where I knew there was different laws, but I was not clear and I did not want to be the person to tell them the wrong information. So what we did is a simple call to the property manager that we're friends with. He explained everything on how we needed to craft that counter in that purchase agreement so that our buyer could evict the tenant, pay them, the seller could pay them the relocation fee, and we could work that into the closing cost, seller, buyer credit scenario and negotiations. So making sure you have the right notices and making sure you're following that process is extremely important because the lender only allows 60 days after closing for a buyer, owner, occupier to move into a rental property. So all of that has to be very strategic, very accurate, and very, very handled by somebody that knows what they're doing. So make sure you have a good property management contact. If you need a couple, let me know. Now, the management bucket of all of this. If you're revitalizing your rentals in 2024, management is a huge win or loss for rental properties. We see some horribly managed rental properties. We see some amazingly managed rental properties. The biggest thing is you got to understand that management isn't the tenant. And what I want to talk about really quick, super important, is why long-term tenants are not the best option in IMO, in my opinion. I get a lot of hate on this. One of my clients, we just sat down for lunch on Friday, was really talking about this. He agreed with me. The point of having a tenant is not to sell them the property. The point of having a tenant is to have them occupy that property and pay you rent. They occupy that property for a specific time period. They then have the option to continue to stay on. They have the option to remove themselves and move out. But if your only option is to buy properties and keep tenants for 20 years, then your rent increase strategy has to be on point. What we like to do is time and time again, I hear investors say that they have great tenants, that they have been there forever with no repair calls and no headaches. While some of these factors have merit, here's why I don't like long-term tenants. Rent increases should remain at market alignment. With long-term tenants, a lot of times we don't see market alignment rents. Repair calls should be expected, not rewarded for not having any. So then what we do is I have a property inspection or a property walkthrough. There are tons of those small repairs everywhere because that long-term tenant kept their mouth shut, right? Not to say that that's good or bad, but I'm saying that that's the result of not communicating about small repairs. Quiet tenants oftentimes means there's issues going on. I've been to rental properties. There was marijuana grows going on, meth labs. There was just a slew of other issues, guys. Multiple tenants there that are not on lease. Quiet tenants oftentimes are good and bad. It all depends on the case. Lack of turnover has long gaps in updating and remodeling. We just remodeled a unit that was 20-year tenant was in it. It cost us way more money to remodel that unit. There was way more wear and tear. There was way more issues that should have been brought up to us. There was way more cigarette smoking that the old landlord wasn't taking care of. We had to paint that duplex 4 times, guys, to get it up and running. Rent shouldn't be cheaper than owning a home. Now, I want to be clear here. In some markets, it is. In some markets, it isn't. Owning a home has tons of expenses: insurance, taxes, mortgage payment, maintenance, repairs, improvements, and your time equity, mowing, cleaning up, whatever, replacing the fence. When you're renting something, you do none of that. You pay your rent, and that condition of experience is expected. So if you have a long-term tenant that does nothing to the property, the wear and tear is huge, the rents are not high, you're in a problem. Now, let's move through this really quick. Property management versus self-managing in 2024. I think every person that ever buys a rental property should never just pass it to property management unless they are an extremely busy professional. And that can be in any career, any capacity: doctor, attorney, entrepreneur, teacher. I think every person who buys a rental property should manage a rental for at least 1 year. Learn the laws, learn the paperwork, learn the tenant process, learn the expectations of calls, learn the management aspect of owning a property. How do you pass on feedback to a property manager if you've never actually done what the property manager is doing? So we went 1 to 2 years of managing all of our rentals, right? We still have maybe 1 or 2 rentals that we manage on our own due to location or ideally other options that are happening. But when should you hire property management? I'm feeling out of control with the number of units I've acquired. I'm not able to keep up with repair calls. I'm starting to feel disconnected from tenant communication, meaning you're not keeping up with it. I'm just not feeling it anymore. Discuss the selling problem, right? They want to sell it because they're a tired landlord. I'm making mistakes that are leading to court cases or losses. Hear this literally all the time. We lost this case because I served it wrong, or I did this wrong, or I said this. I'm not understanding my return on investment on my time or well-being. I'm losing money. I'm not making more money, or I'm losing my mind. All reasons to hire professional property management, guys. Now, navigating the critical decision of when to change management. There's a lot of people out there that own rental properties that have just been okay. They haven't set the benchmark. They have really limited communication with their PM. Guys, I want to be really, 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 really clear here. There's a lot of great property management and there's a lot of crappy property management. It is the same for real estate brokers. There's the same for any profession: contractors, plumbers, anybody. There's good and bad. There's 2 paths to my decision process. I am the landlord, I self-manage, or I'm paying someone to be the landlord and it's not self-manages. So what key identifiers should you witness to make the shift evident? Self-managed or professionally managed? I or the property management are not following the law. That is the number 1 reason why you should change property management companies or yourself. I or the property management are not up to speed with rental regulations. I see this all the time, guys. I or the property management are losing money each and every month or year on year when you get your Schedule E tax returns. If your property management allows you to lose money every year and doesn't give you a prescription of solution or correction, fire them. I am not creating an annual plan of implementing and maximizing returns or management efficiency. Everything we're just talking about in this webinar. I am experiencing way longer than normal vacancy issues. You have an issue with marketing or property management. You are not keeping me in the loop with repairs or capital improvement needs. See that all the time. We're not performing biannual or annual property walkthrough inspections. Super important. Guys, if you got one thing from this entire inspection or in this entire presentation, is do your inspections. Extremely important. About 3 or 4 weeks ago, I saw that one of my tenants had 3 or 4 cats in the garage from pictures. My property management sent out somebody that's lower on the totem pole to go take those pictures, and I caught it in the photos and was like, whoa, 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 we are 0 cats in that property. What is going on? So we had to correct it. Keep your eyes on your properties, guys. I am not communicating with me or on a regular basis or at least quarterly on the status of tasks of the tenants. If you create a marketing plan or you create a management plan for your rentals, have your property manager follow up with you every 90 days or 180 days so that you know the progress of that task list. I am or they are not consistently vetting their contractors and trying to reduce labor or repair costs. Guys, I see this across the board. Property managers like, oh, expenses have gone way up with all of these people, yet we're making 10%. on those services. Guys, how often are they shopping around? How often are they vetting other contractors? How often are they meeting for coffee with another contractor or a repairman or a plumber to see where they can cost segregation or where they can value engineer or cost and analyze other vendors? Because if they're making a spiff on each and every repair that's happening and those expenses get higher and higher each and every year, and they're doing nothing on helping that cost expenditure, that doesn't help you. Bottom line. Lastly, they or you are not happy about owning or managing rental properties. Guys, it is amazing. I've seen property management companies that we have interacted with that sound like they hate their job. Like no positivity, no performance, absolutely no good attitude. And at the end of the day, gone. Remove them from your situation because they're not going to help your rental property. Now, what good management will mean: low vacancy, low delinquencies, fast turnover, long-term tenant adverse, predictable cash flow, low headaches, great appreciation, and more curb appeal. If your property manager is not helping you with at least 50% of these things on this list on a regular basis, gone. Remove them. The goal of property management is not just to manage tenant communication and that's it. It's to help you build a better rental portfolio over the long term. They are protecting your investments. They are your fiduciary to your investment properties. Time and time again, I hear it, I see it, it's what it is. Now, the revitalization, last part of this entire presentation. This is the most important piece. If you stayed all the way to the end, I appreciate it. And the people who are going to receive this video, if you've saved this all the way to the end, this is the most important bucket. The annual plan to create more value is first, knowing what your property is worth today. Each and every year, you should have a comparative market analysis or appraisal or some sort of valuation, both of an APOD or a CMA of your property. Why? You want to see that your property's value is going up or where it's staying in terms of equity position. Next, send out rent increases with proper notice to increase net operating income. Not saying that you should do it for every property, but make sure that you're actually doing something to increase income. Target, Walmart, all of these big companies, prices increase, margins increase. I get people that will come to me and they'll be like, hey, why is this rent so high? This is highway robbery. You're an idiot landlord. You're the problem. But they'll go to the grocery store and pay 44% more for a gallon of milk. They don't yell at the cashier. Every time they go to the grocery store, they're paying twice as what they did 10 years ago. But they're not the problem. The landlord is. Handle all troubled tenants and get them on track so there's no delinquencies. Guys, do not slack with notices. Do not slack with taking care of troubled issues. Fill any vacancies quickly so you have leases in place. Sometimes what I'll see is a multifamily property pop up. It'll be a 10 unit. There'll be 3 units that are vacant. And the first question I'll ask to the property manager or the broker, they'll say, hey, are they actively trying to fill these? Or are they just sitting empty because there's a bunch of problems? Create an annual repair punch list, like we said, to address and complete projects quickly. Analyze your capital expenditures, needs, and complete projects quickly. Run a full APOD analysis to understand your true valuation. Gather all your due diligence documents and create that vault of things that you need to have each and every year. And trim the expenses that are not needed so you can reduce operating expenses. Guys, what I noticed in my portfolio is we had a bunch of tech tools and other things that we were using for the acquisition side of the business, but we weren't using that much. So we had to cut some of those costs in order to increase our monthly recurring income, right? And I want you guys to know that that is just a simple look at your P&L. What are we paying in tech tools? What are we paying for this? What are we paying that? Is there anything we can trim? And is there anything that we can add that's going to increase our income on a regular basis? Number 10, invest in curb appeal, photography, drone, websites, and marketing materials, especially if you own multifamily, guys. Super important. Well packaged up, well marketed investment properties are always going to get more views, more showings, and hopefully more offers, more valuation. We really stress this at the Operative Group. Like when we take an investment property to market, we're going to go pay twice as much for marketing. We're going to get it out to our email list. We're going to do each and everything possible. And we're going to have a strategic plan of pricing and reduction or increase depending on what we need to do and based upon what that property is bringing in terms of income. If you treat your investment properties like regular single-family homes that are occupied by homeowners, you will fail in this business in terms of getting long-term appreciation and returns at sale. Now, how to turn your portfolio upside down. Troubled rentals. This is the exact plan to revitalize your rental portfolio in 2024. So everything on the last slide is everything we just talked about for pretty much slide 0 through 39. Now, I want you guys to understand that the valuation audit, the property management audit, the condition and features audit, the tenant audit, the profit and loss audit, the monthly, quarterly, annual plan, and keeping versus selling analysis, which we'll talk here in about 2 seconds, and your year-over-year end annual plan review and readjust is the biggest problem I see with rental property owners. Why they're not revitalizing their rentals last year is they did none of this. Valuation audit, property management audit, condition and features audit, tenant audit, profit and loss audit, monthly, quarterly, annual plan. And the ultimate question, should they keep this rental property because it's profitable, or should they sell it? Most of the people that we get calls from that are rental property owners, and they say, we're not selling, we're not interested in selling. I'm like, oh, awesome. How's that property performing? Would you buy more properties that are performing just like this property that you wouldn't sell if you could find more of those same properties? And they say, oh, well, we're not looking to buy any more properties. Okay, so you're in the sustainability phase of your trajectory of your investment career. How are you making that property have decreased expenses, increased income, and more efficiency and better valuation over time? Clueless. Lost. Guys, implement these things on this slide. Understand what that means. Reach out to us if you need help. We'll point you in the right direction. We'll get you get in contact with right property management. Now, when is it just not working out? Should you 1031 or move on? I want to break this down. If you're not familiar with a 1031 exchange, 1031 exchanges are all about understanding, should I be purchasing a property that has more valuation and more opportunity, or should I just sell it and pay my capital gains or tax burden? All right. The age-old question of, should I 1031 into something better, or should I sell to recapture profit? 1031 should be for investors in growth and potentially sustain mode. Let's start there. 1031 should be for investors interested in investing. If you're a tired landlord, you should not be 1031ing unless you're going to be completely handing over to property management and you're very, very bottom line oriented. A 1031 should be for investors seeking generational wealth. Why? They're kicking the can down the road for tax burden. You should definitely be interested in building that portfolio for generational wealth because the tax burden is moving on. 1031 should be for investors wanting more income. Now, moving on should be for the exhausted landlord. Moving on should be for the retired landlord. Moving on should be for a investor seeking a different outcome, right? I've seen people sell all of their rental portfolio and move into syndications or passive investments. I've seen people buy short-term rentals. It's seeking a different outcome. Moving on should be for the children not interested in rental properties. There's a reason I put this last, guys. We get a call all the time, especially in probate. And they'll say, hey, so-and-so or my dad owned a couple rental properties. We're not interested in being landlords and we're not interested in managing rental properties. Sell them. That's exactly what I'm talking about. There's a very, very, very high percentage of people who inherit properties from their last generation who don't have any passion for real estate investing. They have no passion other than the money that is made from those rental properties. And that's okay if they're professionally property managed. The asset management is on point. But 9 times out of 10 that I see, managed incorrectly, tons of deferred maintenance, horrible tenant issues, and they're decaying and sitting and going into distress. That's what I see. So how can I help you? Because I'm not selling you anything, just like I promised. If you need help with management, I can refer you to the best property management. If you need help with profit and loss, I can refer you to the best accountants. If you need help with 1031 exchanges, I can refer you to the best facilitators. If you need help with cost segregation, I can refer you to some of the best cost seg consultants. If you need help with improvements, I can refer you to some of the best contractors in some of the cities, not everywhere. If you need help with portfolio review and audit, my team does this at zero cost. Like I said, I'm not selling you anything. If you have rental properties that are not doing well in your portfolio, reach out to us. Let us do a benchmark analysis of what's going on in those properties. Let's ask the hard questions. Let's figure out the quarterly annual plan. Let's look at the property management, and let's try to help you make good decisions. Obviously, we get paid when properties sell, but obviously we get value to our consumer or our audience or our clients when we help them make good decisions. That's it. The not so free zone, what our clients get. If you work with us, you get due diligence checklists, you get annual law updates and emails from our PM. You get APODs for each and every one of your properties. You have an all-star vendor list. We have a toolbox of technology that we implement and analyze and monitor our properties. And we have a couple books. But at the end of the day, got to be a client. So anybody out here have any questions? We're gonna have about 5 minutes for Q&A and then shut it down. I'm gonna read through here. Mason Drews said, "Don't be an investor trying to learn in the 11th hour the liquidation day. It's tough to see someone panic down the stretch and liquidation stage pricing their exit way is too high because they don't know anything about the rental property and can't figure out why they're getting any offers or losing money month to month." Totally true. Totally true. Looks like Daniela said, "Incredible, valuable webinar. Thank you." You're welcome. Guys, if there is no questions, that's totally okay. I'm here to be a resource for anybody. You can find me at Oregon Real Estate Expert. This presentation, this video is going to go out to everybody that wants it. And at the end of the day, if you need any help, guys, we're here. We're going to be shooting, like I said, 1 to 2 of these webinars a month in 2024. I appreciate everybody coming to this. I speak quickly, I speak fast. I'm super passionate about investment properties and helping clients and myself and portfolio people make the best decisions, and anything that we can get better on it. Really, really appreciate any feedback. So thank you, Gary. Thanks for all your helpful nuggets. You're welcome. And if there are no other questions, guys, I'm going to end this baby here in the next 90 seconds. And stay tuned for our next one. We have a lot of guests that are going to come to these next webinars, and I'm going to have property management, lenders, different collaboration and relationships that I think are going to be really, really good for the added value as we move forward through this era of rental property management and rental property performance. And 2024, guys, do not slack. Create a plan, set a benchmark. Go through all of these slides and really ask yourself, is what Dan's saying actually applicable to my rental properties? And should I implement a strategy that's going to change things up? So thank you, everybody. Have a great weekend, and we will talk soon.